but we do want to get to our next guest here. Protests continuing in Portland into the early morning hours on Monday after demonstrations throughout the weekend. And joining us now to discuss is Brett Tolman, former U.S. Attorney for Utah and former Chief Counsel for Crime and Terrorism on the Senate Judiciary Committee. Brett, it's good to have you with us this morning. The city's mayor of Portland recently calling on President Trump to remove federal agents sent there to disperse crowds and protect federal property. It's something that people in Portland have also asked. What's the right move?
Well, there is a clash for a reason, and that's because the mayor and often the governors in some of these, more democratically controlled states are having a difficult time, asking for assistance and help. And so I think the president really had no choice. And when they started to target the federal buildings, it's within his authority. And so I think he did what he thought was the right move. But you can see it starts with protests that seem to be appropriate, and they seem to be targeted protests. And then by late night, they push the envelope, and they test the resolve of those federal agents.
There are images of protesters being beaten, tear gas being used by the agents. Is that allowed constitutionally? Is that the right move, or do you think that went too far?
No, I mean, before they utilize any of the force that they're capable of using, they have been warning the crowds. They've been setting boundaries. They're using the least lethal use of force that they can right now, using tear gas and using rubber bullets. Things, you see them. There is a lot of restraint. People get upset, but I think the country as a whole is really just anguished by the fact that folks don't seem to stop at this point. They go beyond protesting to actually rioting.
Well, President Trump suggesting that he will be sending troops and agents to other major U.S. cities in New York, in Chicago, in Philadelphia, potentially. And a lot of this comes as we are just 100 days out from the election. Do you anticipate that this is a re-election strategy for the president to show his force and to appeal to his base by doing that?
Well, yeah, I think politics is always something that you think about. But right now, the country is very divided in terms of the political climate. But setting that aside, what the president does or doesn't do, seems to rally both sides in the direction that they want to rally. I think right now the president just simply wants to try to get control, at least to protect the federal buildings, the monuments, some of our, national treasures. I think he is aiming at protecting that. He is utilizing authority that he has. There will be challenges to that. You can see, though, that there's a lot of resolve in the federal government to flex at this moment. And, we hope that calmer heads might prevail. I think members of the communities need to step up. I think citizens need to step up. And it's odd to see, who's actually pushing the envelope for these folks in Portland. And it's sad to see what's happening.
You recently wrote a piece for the Federalist saying that we don't need to abolish the police, but we do need to fundamentally reform the institution. How do you recommend that happens?
Well, anybody that's worked in this area knows there are, extreme challenges sometimes to holding police officers that make, bad and often criminal decisions accountable. I've even had police chiefs reach out to me and say, hey, we want to hold our bad police officers accountable. Can you help us? And you see things like many of the unions that have implemented rules that eliminate the ability as a prosecutor to immediately investigate a police officer that may have been criminal or had misconduct. That's an issue that needs to be addressed. Qualified immunity is an issue that needs to be addressed. The Supreme Court, we thought, was going to take that up, but that's a doctrine that has been created by the courts and not the legislature, and so there are some adjustments there. Use of force needs to be dealt with. There's inconsistent standards in use of force. I'd love to see that addressed. And I think let's face it, training and de-escalation training can be improved. use of no-knock, warrants, as well as chokeholds. Those are things that even police officers want to review and want to make sure that, they're all abiding by the same rules and being held accountable the same way.
Brett, we got to leave it there, but thank you for joining us today. That's Brett Tolman, former U.S. Attorney for Utah and Chief Counsel for Crime and Terrorism on the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee.